When we are born, we are only human beings, without prejudices, without social levels. We are all equal, and not subject to judgment, but only when we are born. Then with time we make choices, and it is the choices that put us before an earthly or divine judgment. I have always thought that life is a testing ground. You were probably born into a poor family or probably into a financially rich family. In both cases you have made choices. In some cultures it is thought that if you are born financially rich then you have no reason to make mistakes, but the magnifying glass on this research goes on every man and woman, without distinction of sex and race, age, social class and state. It is once that this judgment has been wise, where do we go? Is there a phase 2 of life? Or rather, does life after death exist? Is this really the meaning of life? Take care of our cultural level, aspire, compete and strive to excel, and eventually die? This topic is as curious as it is ambiguous. Scientists who do not believe in God but admit that there may be life after death, and religious who do not admit such a possibility. I hope that this article that has required a lot of research can help you shed light. I want to clarify that I started writing this article with the precise intention of sticking only to the facts we have available. I do not profess any belief nor adopt a religion. I tried to use beyond any reasonable doubt, logic. To date, science knows as much about death as a dog looking at the moon, and moreover an exhaustive definition of what life is, has not yet been given. Far from being a game of semantics, let's analyze with reason all the cards we have in our hands and start from the first. What do we mean by life after death? Some believe by faith, others believe by direct feedback. Neither can give direct and tangible proof of the fact that life after death can exist in terms of resurrection in spirit, for what it may mean. Some speak of resurrection in flesh but on another dimension or planet. In this Socratic ignorance, what we know is that most of the physical matter around us is still unknown and even invisible. The table of elements itself is not complete. Therefore it is to be excluded a priori that the human mind is able to arrive at a state of knowledge about life and death equal to the understanding of before and after. We know that our sensory systems do not see reality but reconstruct it. We know for sure that what we see is not exactly what is physically present, which could mean that the definitive evidence could be next to or in front of us without actually realizing it. And in this article we will analyze it one by one. Fortunately, we are endowed with rational rigor, and if we follow a rational logical path we come to only one conclusion: life after death could not only exist, but it is inevitable. There is no human on the face of the earth who is not programmed autonomously to hope to live forever. If it is true that in the genes of our DNA we have this sentient chemical reaction, how is it possible that we are destined for burial? Science has no answer. Why do the oldest documents ever found on Earth and in caves speak of eternal life? Science has no answer. Why does a person feel pain and non-acceptance of the fact that he is no longer young? If we are destined for death, why at the end of life the brain cannot perceive the word end in any way? Once again, science has no answer. Billions of scientific research in a desperate attempt to figure out why the hell the cells of our body that are basically programmed to regenerate one day, stop doing so. A defense mechanism that prevents the brain from accepting death, except in cases of suicidal instincts or mental deviations, and once these cases are excluded, a man is said to be sane if he wishes to live, not die. But if we die, why is it so healthy to think that he can or wants to live? It is a contradiction in existence. If we were to use logic we would have to accept that we are all crazy. Or, there is something else. Look carefully at what happens in our brain. When we feel anguish, it is an emotion caused by a nerve that we have in our brain, and it is activated only when our nervous system perceives a danger or a defeat, or ultimately an unreal fact, and by unreal we mean what does not belong to our imminent reality. Not to be repetitive, but why are we programmed like this if death is the only hope? Our brain after all is able to understand the concept of finite but not infinite. If you look at the table or desk in front of you, you will notice that it starts somewhere and ends somewhere else. Ditto the walls of the room you are in. The same goes for the room you are in, for a palace, for a city, for a planet. But when we talk about the universe, the concept of finite becomes infinite because we have no idea where the universe begins or where it ends. Just as we have no idea how life on Earth was possible or where it ends. Certainly, you know when you were born and where you were born, but in a wide-ranging view life on this Earth when it was born, science does not know. There must be a specific point on Earth where evolution or God, for believers, gave rise to that embryo, which then began to double, until you get to a man who lives, breathes, hunts, and feels emotions, and among these emotions is born naturally the hope of eternal life, not of death. We do not even consider it natural. Millions of years of evolution and we have not been able to accept the fact that we die. Think for a moment before moving forward with this video. Memory tells us that we do not know anyone who has died and returned. The same knowledge of the past also tells us that the very fact that no one has returned does not constitute proof that one does not go anywhere when one dies. Be very careful. I am not here to try to convince you that life after death exists. I just want to bring your perception center of the scales that weigh this topic. There is no tangible evidence of life after death, and there is not even concrete evidence to the contrary. All we do is hope, right? Let's stick to science for a second, and interact only with the discoveries made. Do you know what hope is? Hope as love is nothing more than a chemical reaction of our brain called oxytocin. The existence of this emotion is handed down to us by a gene called mother genome, which is present in our DNA and is also called genetic imprinting. Genetic imprinting is nothing more than a programmed basic knowledge. For example, science knows that a human being, even if born and grows up without human relationships and books, would still be able to distinguish good or evil, light and darkness, true and false, physical and abstract, survival instinct and so on. All these programs are present by default in our DNA. They are imprinting, and imprinting means printing, and in the printing of our DNA handed down there is also eternal life. If I asked you, would you like to live forever? In case your answer is yes, it means that your mind and heart possess that imprinting. And here I repeat the question I asked you earlier. Why are we programmed to the prospect of eternal life but then die? When you experience intense pain, when you live a situation of extreme danger, our nervous system also changes our whole way of seeing, feeling and thinking and perceiving. The only constant that remains unchanged even if the survival instinct is activated is the desire to live. Because any human being in front of a situation of extreme danger or experience that approaches death